What if I told you there's a handheld gaming console out there that not only brings AAA gaming to your fingertips, but also does so with impressive battery life, efficiency, performance, all in a package that is far better than its predecessor in comfort, connectivity, and its capabilities? This is the ASUS ROG Ally X, and I've spent a ton of time with its predecessor, the original ASUS ROG Ally, and to me, this stands out as a solid spec bump and revised version of the Ally. Look, I love handhelds. Whether it's the Steam Deck OLED, the original Ally, and most recently the ANEO Flip KB, I've had hands-on with a ton of these portable PCs, which has allowed me to narrow my focus and find what actually works best for me. Well, spoiler alert, this is it, the ROG Ally X. And I'll tell you about it in a second, but before we do, I just want to say thank you so much for the support that you've showed me on this channel. We're almost at 50,000 subscribers, which is just incredible, so thank you so much for the support. Anyways, the Ally X is a $799 handheld, $100 over the MSRP of the original. I want to get pricing out of the way because assuming that you're buying brand new in a store like Best Buy, I want to let you know what you're gaining on the Ally X over the original model. For starters, the battery is now double the size at 80 watt hours, which is a massive improvement. And we'll talk about battery life and efficiency later, but ASUS has made the X thicker to accommodate this and a new cooling system. The added thickness to me is a non-issue in terms of comfort, even though it is slightly heavier by nearly 80 grams. And the reason for this, I think, is that the deeper grips allow you to just have a much more comfortable hold of the Ally. And don't get me wrong, I love the original, but I did think the grips were a little too shallow, making it uncomfortable for long play sessions, especially when it comes to shooters like Call of Duty. Now, since we're talking about the chassis here, before we dive into specs, the Ally X actually does have improved analog sticks. There's more texture and the ridges are more pronounced, making it feel much more responsive in games that require precision aiming. And I've always felt like the original Ally's analogs were a little floaty, whereas now I'm definitely able to track enemies better in those games like Call of Duty, thanks to them actually tightening them up a touch. This makes me enjoy this handheld a lot more, and I'm really happy to see that something even as small as the analog sticks have made a huge difference to this console. ASUS also did remove the XG mobile port, which was used for eGPUs, and replaced it with a USB-C port, now giving us an additional Type-C. The USB 4 port on the Ally can do 100 watts, although there is still only an included 65 watt charger with the Ally. The D-pad feels better, the triggers, and even though they shrunk the rear buttons, I actually find the positioning of them to be perfect, at least for my hands. The front stereo speakers are noticeably louder, and going back to the improved cooling system, there is far more ventilation. I find during a heavy title, even when using the turbo 25 watt or 30 watts when charging, the Ally doesn't get too loud, and most importantly, it isn't a whiny sound. It's actually very easy on the ears and doesn't cause any issues at all. There is still a 3.5mm combo port, and when it comes to the microSD card slot, it seems like the new cooling system has resolved the previous issue where the Ally with some users reported dead microSD cards. Now, the display is the same. It's a 1080p 120Hz 500 nit screen at 7 inches. And while it is a solid display and I have absolutely no complaints, I would have loved to see OLED on this thing. Not only does OLED give you quicker pixel response times, better contrast, it looks better and kind of gives you the illusion that it's a sharper display. But that being said, with all of the improvements that ASUS added, putting an OLED display in this would have increased the cost significantly to where it might not have looked like as good of a deal. And one of those areas that ASUS actually improved the Ally X is now by including a 2280 full-sized NVMe SSD. Not only is it double the size at 1 terabyte, but it's easier and cheaper to swap because of the form factor. You could take this thing all the way up to 8 terabytes if you wanted to, and I will most likely be putting a 4 terabyte NVMe drive in this thing just to have a really big backlog of my titles and not have to worry about deleting anything. But it's nice because you don't have to shell out extra for the smaller 2230 SSDs. The RAM, it also saw a huge boost from LPDDR5 at at 6400 MHz to LPDDR5X at 7500. Not only is it significantly quicker, but there's an additional 8 GB on board, jumping from 16 to 24. This for me makes the biggest difference to the performance and stability of the Ally X, especially with more challenging to run AAA titles, since now you can allot 8 gigs of RAM to the GPU whilst still having 16 GB left over for system memory. And speaking of the GPU, the Ally is actually still using the Z1 Extreme processor from the original Ally. So when it comes to the performance gains that you're seeing, it's mostly because of the memory. Now, that was a mouthful, so let's just go ahead and skip to gaming on this device. I've been playing a handful of titles: Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 6, Battlefield 2042, Sifu, and so much more. And the reason why I like the Ally, specifically over something like the Steam Deck, is because of the games that I personally like to play. Don't get me wrong, I love indie titles and campaign-driven games, and I do enjoy a narrative from time to time. But when I have the downtime, what I like to do is slap the crap out of people in games like Call of Duty, because it lets me take all of my rage out. And when it comes to the Steam Deck, games like Call of Duty and their anti-cheat don't actually work natively because of Linux, which is just unfortunate. However, since the Ally X runs Windows, there's no issue at all. In Black Ops 6, for example, I get a solid 90 to 110 frames per second with lowered settings at 900p. This is without any FSR. When using FSR, I could bump the resolution to the display's full 1080p output with frame generation and have no problem whatsoever. I actually don't mind running most titles at 900p though. It just gives me some more headroom since the display is a little smaller and scales correctly. There isn't actually a lot of difference between it and 1080p. So when it comes to the performance profiles, I mostly keep the Ally X at its 25-watt turbo mode. And the reason for this is that I find most games do a pretty good job when it comes to the power draw. Even at 25 watts, I find a handful of games that I play don't pull anywhere near that realistically, and occasionally only do spike when it's a more challenging scene or something like a larger map. Now, because the Ally X has an 80 watt-hour battery, I don't actually have the battery anxiety that I used to, and for games like Call of Duty, I used to only really play them when tethered to the power cable, so I can get that 30 watts and extend my playtime. Though the 25 watts seems to be a really good sweet spot on the Ally X. Now, if I was playing games like Dead Cells, of course I would turn it down since Dead Cells could run on a literal toaster. But even for games like Power Washing Simulator, Black Ops 2 Zombies, and other easier to run titles, I just set it and forget it at 25 watts. The Ally X's efficiency and the larger battery alone make this handheld a huge upgrade for me personally. Look, when it comes to PC gaming, I love tinkering. It's something that I've always done for like my entire life, especially when it comes to FPS games, especially esports and competitive shooters. I try to squeeze out the maximum performance that I can. That being said, when it comes to a handheld device, this is an area in which I actually don't want to be doing this. I actually hate feeling the need to jump in and play with the settings just to get the games to work correctly, mostly because when I am playing the handhelds, I'm in a pinch or relaxing on the couch or in the bed. And being able to play this for 3 to 4 hours with demanding titles whilst not having to really touch any settings or hear the fans scream make the Ally X a more enjoyable experience, and it makes me actually want to pick up and play it. Now, that being said, I actually have done some tweaks of my own to make the Ally X a little more enjoyable and pick up and play. I installed this app called Play Night, which is a game launcher, and I've linked it to all of my services like Steam, EA, Epic, but I have made the Ally boot into Play Night from launch. So when I turn on the Ally, I'm basically greeted with a home screen or a console-like dashboard. Clicking on any of these games opens the respective launchers, and when I close out of a title, it automatically kills the launcher in the background so that I don't need to worry about the performance overhead being hit from having Uplay, Steam, and so on running all the time. Now, Armory Crate is a good solution. It does something similar. It organizes your games and launchers, and I still do use it occasionally. However, I mostly use it for the button shortcut. I like that I'm able to change my performance modes, LED brightness, and settings like RSR and control modes on the fly, but Play Night and how I've set it up on my Ally X makes this thing feel like a first-party console and allows me to forget about Windows entirely. Not that Windows on this thing is necessarily a bad thing, and for me it's actually something that I prefer because it allows me to play the titles that I enjoy with their anti-cheat services. But I think we can all agree that Windows, even with its touchscreen capabilities, is just a very clunky and annoying OS to operate on one of these handheld consoles. Anyways, if you're interested in Play Night, I will leave a link down below to a video that I found about how to set it up and all of the tweaks that I've done to it. Back to the console though. I have been loving playing on it. Lately, I honestly haven't really been able to play games that much. I'm renovating a studio space and I've been really busy with the channel, but being able to try titles from Game Pass and have my entire Steam backlog at my fingertips on the X has been a blast. Sifu, for example, it runs fantastically on this. And it's been fun. It's a very challenging combat title that I've been picking up and even restarted because I've died frequently on my last save. I brought up Power Wash Simulator, but I downloaded it the other day, played the intro, and kind of just got lost in it. It was like the most relaxing gaming experience that I've had in a very long time. And Diablo 4, well, I really loved Diablo 3, but I never really got into this one all that much. Though being able to pick it up and play it in bed with solid performance and smooth frame rates has been really exciting and something that I look forward to at the end of the day. And like I said, with Black Ops 2 Zombies earlier, it's been a fun nostalgic trip just playing some solo zombies on town or trying to get a high score. I will say though, I did want to skip the Ally X at a glance because the price is something that scared me away. In Canada, its $1,099 MSRP is just above what I would personally spend for a handheld. Though after using it, it is kind of hard to deny that this is the best handheld gaming experience that I've ever had. If I was purchasing the Ally right now in late 2024 and I had the option of choosing the Ally and the Ally X both at their MSRP, there is no doubt in my mind that as a buyer, I would go for the Ally X for that extra $100 US. Now, if the price of the Ally X or even the Ally is something that's been keeping you away, keep in mind that there's a lot more to this just being a handheld. I connect this to my CalDigit TS4 dock all the time and immediately turn it into a desktop computer. I could use, say, Photoshop, Lightroom, or any other professional app on this thing, and it works flawlessly. You could even consider getting a Thunderbolt external eGPU and make this thing play nicer with higher fidelity displays and let you play far more demanding titles. The Ally and Ally X are often overlooked for their potentials of quite literally being a tool that you could use for video editing, schoolwork, and it could seriously be your only computer if that's a setup that could work for you. Now, I have actually had the Ally X in my hands for a little bit, but I have yet to dabble with emulation on this thing. It's something that I want to cover in a future video, and I also do want to talk about some accessories and stuff, so if you want to see more Ally content, let me know in the comments down below. But I mean, yeah, I would say that the Ally X is a no compromise handheld. Obviously, it does come at a price premium, but at the end of the day, most importantly, you get what you pay for. This is a very impressive piece of hardware, and despite how positively I've talked about this handheld, all of my opinions are my own. This is not an ad, and I really do think that this is among the best, if not the best Windows handheld that you can get right now. Thank you for watching this video on the ROG Ally X. If you want to see more of this, like I said, let me know in the comments down below. If you've watched all the way through, go ahead and drop a controller emoji down below so I know who the real ones are. And before you leave, consider liking and subscribing on your way out, as it really does help out the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.